Okay, so today I wanted to discuss a principle that is both very important in the derech hapsak of halacha lema'aseh, as well as very indicative of the psak halacha, how they used to be posek in Morocco. That's number 2. And number 3, something very practical, halacha lema'aseh, in regards to bishul akum. Those are the 3 points that I want to present. So let's start with the following. There is a machloket whether we know that there's a rule called sefeika. Sefeika means that if a person has one safek, so there is it's on a deoraita, let's say, so he has to be posek safek deoraita lechumra. If he has another safek, so we're lenient, right? And sefeika is a couple of places in Shask, Tuvot Davtet and others, and the Shach in the end of Klali sefeika, Siman Kufyud, as a long arichut. And safek sefeika cannot be from the same shem. It can't be the same safek, just a little different nuance, but it can't be the same. You can't make a safek sefeika that is not mitapech, that doesn't go backwards. We're not either way. We're not going to explain that now. What the poskim are done is whether we say safek sefeika with different machloket. Different, let's say nowadays we're living in a door where there's different machlokot. There's no hachra'a brura. There's machlokot in the rishonim. There's a machlokot in the acharonim. So when a person wants to come and decide halacha lema'aseh after all of these generations that passed, lechaora, he could tell himself that, well, I could say safek if the halacha is like this or like that. Even if you want to say it's like the other side, but there are some poskim that permit it anyways, in this nuance. We'll give examples. But that's sefeika beplukta derebuta. This is very controversial because you're not making a safek that is in reality, that if it really happened or not. This classic sefeika that we have in Shas is if a person says petach patuach matzati. So the Gemara says maybe he shouldn't be believed because number 1, maybe it wasn't safek tachtav safek eno tachtav, and imim tetzlomer tachtav, maybe it was onis. Both of those sfekot are not things that are dependent upon a machloket. Rather, it's dependent upon a reality, a mitziut. And safek beplukta de rebuta isn't really dependent upon a mitziut. So who says that will work? Now, this is very important to discuss because there are some of the great poskis farad that use sefeika by a plukta de rebuta heavily throughout the generations, and even nowadays we'll see many of the Sephardic poskim, including, primarily I would say Rav Ovadia Yosef, but even others. Rabbi Shalom Mesas uses it a lot. Rav Ben Zion Bashol, they use sefeika often. And it's a controversy whether you say sefeika on a plukta de rabuta. The Mari Ben Lev in Chele Gimel Siman Mem Aleph was against saying sefeika by plukta de rabuta. He says it's all considered one safek. This posek's mater, the other posek is asers. And even if you want to say this posek's asers, but sometimes he's mater. Okay, so it's all the same heter. The Marit in Chelek Aleph, Siman Kuftet Zayin, is the one who says we do say a sefeika in Plukta de Rebuta, and also the Ilchot Kitanot of Yaakov Chagiz, who originally learned in the city of Fez, and he later went to Yerushalayim, one of the Gdolei Yerushalayim. Chelek Bet, Siman Kuf Chet, writes, Im yesh la'asot sefeika mikitat haposkim tshuva nimtza b'achronim she'osim ken. And even though the Maribal says we don't say this, nevertheless, Sachin Mistavra, that as long as you could find two different angles where you could say sefeika, it's going to be said. And the Sefer Torah Shlamim from the Minchat Yaakov on the Shulchan Aruch, in his Sefer Klali sefeika mechudashim, you can find it at the end of the Badei HaShulchan. He writes two opinions, and he says, V'rabim cholkim, and it seems to be that we do say sefeika. Okay, as long as one has a different angle than the next, we do say sefeika. Not only that, we say sefeika and plukta de rabuta to be motzi mamon. And there's a famous discussion in the Shav Shma Atata, in Shmata Aleph, Perek Chav Gimel, that how does it help to be motzi mamon? Isn't he a muchzak? So the Shmata explains that on the tzad that you say it's mutar, you're saying legamre, you're being machriya. It's Safek sefeika beplukta derabut has advantages that he can be motzi mamon because it's legamre telling you that one side is totally allowed. Now, there is the following. There's a Rabbi Shalom Mesas wrote a sefer when he was in his youth. We're talking about between 17 and 25 years old. He wrote a phenomenal sefer on Yoredeya called Mizrach Shemesh. It's a phenomenal sefer. Anybody who wants to really learn, when he learns Yoredeya, and especially wants to delve into the opinion of Maran Shulchan Aruch, that sefer is a must. He really, it's shocking, and it's shocking how in what depth he wrote it at such a young age. Either way, he writes over there in his kuntras on sefeika called Beta Safek. He writes over there like this: that he has one important halacha, that from here he proves many different things. What is this halacha? It's written in Hilchot Sefirat Omer, in the Shulchan Aruch, that if a person is not sure whether he counted, he's not sure whether he counted or not, so he could continue counting with a bracha. Why? So the poskim use a language of Safek sefeika. It's based on the Trumat Adeshen. And what is the Safek sefeika? Safek, maybe he counted and maybe he didn't count. And even if you want to say he didn't count, there are opinions in the Rishonim that every day is a separate day, and you can count every day a new bracha. So therefore, the Sefer Mizrach Shemesh is machriya that you could say Safek sefeika in a plukta de rebuta. Okay? Now, even though we don't really make a sefeika all the time, but here it seems to be in the Shulchan Aruch we do. And Rabbi Shalom Mesas proves from here a few very important points. Number one, we see from over here that we're making a sefeika on plukta de rebuta. Number two, we make a sefeika even when it's a safek that's not shakul, that's not very equal. And number three, Rabbi Shalom Mesas says, and this is going to be the topic for tonight. Number three, Rabbi Shalom Mesas says, we see that you make a Safek sefeika even against Maran. Why? Because Maran says that we're not posek. We're not posek this halacha that if you forget one of the nights, you could count the next day with the bracha. Shulchan Aruch is not posek this way. He says that what happens is that if a person forgot, he's not able to continue. But here, since there's a machloket, we do say a sefeika. So even on psakim that Maran himself wasn't okay with, but it seems to be that we do make a sefeika. Okay? And he proves from a few places that we say sefeika against Maran. Not only that, Rabbi Shalom Mesas brings in a few places that even if you have two sefeikot against the Shulchan Aruch themselves, we will still say, you'll say, what do you mean? The Shulchan Aruch was posek not that way? Doesn't matter, you could still say sefeika. And this is really going to get down to the crux of the issue. This is going to get down to the crux of the issue, because Let's try to understand, what does it mean that we say sefeika against Maran? I mean, Maran is telling you, I don't follow the opinion that you're making a sefeika again. How are you going to start making a sefeika against the Shulchan Aruch? So from here, lechaora, you would see that we never accepted Maran Shulchan Aruch as a hachra. Because if you would accept it Maran Shulchan Aruch as a hachra, then you can never say sefeika against him. So in truth, I was a little bit taken aback at this Sefer Mizrach Shemesh of Rabbi Shalom Misas, and I found afterwards that Rabbi Shlomo ibn Dinan, one of the great Acharonim, HaMelech Shlomo is the chief rabbi in Morocco in the time of Rabbi Rafael and Kawa. He has a Sefer Asher LeShlomo and Bakesh Shlomo. There he has a long teshuvah, and he is very clear that we absolutely do not say sefeika against Maran, even if you have two sefeikot against Maran. And there are other mikorot as well. And one of the reasons is that since we accepted Maran Shulchan Aruch, why would we think that we say sefeika against Maran? And this is what he writes in the Sefer Asher LeShlomo Siman Bet. And he says, therefore, if Maran decided on a matter, you can't say one safek, you can't say two sefeikot, you can't say three sefeikot against it. And it's shocking. Rabbi Shalom Misas has no problem with saying sefeika. He says this in a few places. And here I want to get to the crux of the issue. And where does this apply the most is by bishul akum. Bishul akum is one of the kashrut issues that Sfardim in an Ashkenazi world have to grapple with and find solutions with. Why? Because if a person is going to go into a restaurant, most of the time the cook is going to be a non-Jew, and the fire is going to be lit by the Jew. And the Rama says that when a fire is lit by the Jew, it's called hadlakat ha'esh, so we say that that's okay. Whereas Maran Shulchan Aruch is not posek this way. In Siman Kuf Yud Gimel, I think it's Sivdale, the Shulchan Aruch is posek that chitui is not enough. Hadlakat ha'esh is not enough. You have to have chitui. Okay. Turns out that when Sfardim go to a kosher establishment, al pirov, it's called bishul akum. It's called bishul akum. It's a big problem. Because of this, Rabbi Shalom Misas was very against eating out. Even though he was more lenient on Chalak Bet Yosef regarding bishul akum, which is only derabanan, he was much more machmir, and he wouldn't rely on the leniencies. Comes along the Ben Ish Chai in Shelot Utshuvot Rav Pe'alim, and he was asked about a certain food called zalbia, which is a certain type of pastry that's cooked. And there he is. People think that this sefeika came from Rav Ovadia Yosef, but really the Ben Ish Chai mentioned it beforehand. And the Ben Ish Chai says that you should be able to say safek sefeika. What is this sefeika? Safek, if the Jew, since he turned on the fire according to the Rama, that's okay. And the second safek, even if you want to say that the Rama is going to forbid it, but in a case where it's in a restaurant that a worker is working there under your jurisdiction, it is similar to shfachot. It is similar to subservient maidservants, that the opinion of the Ra'avad is that there is no bishul akum by maidservants, because the whole reason of bishul akum is you can make up to marry their daughter, but if somebody's subservient to you, you're not going to marry their daughter. Like this, a maidservant, you were not choshesh for chatnut, it's not chashuv people, and therefore the Ra'avad said there's no bishul akum. The problem is, Maran Shulchan Aruch right there says we're not posek like the Ra'avad, and even shfachot babayit is asur. So comes along the Ben Ish Chai, says we can say sefeika. Safek if hadlakat ha'esh helps like the Rama, and even if you want to say hadlakat ha'esh doesn't help, but maybe shfachot helps, so you have a sefeika. Says the Ben Ish Chai in Rav Pe'alim, the only problem is we don't say sefeika against Maran Shulchan Aruch. That's what the Ben Ish Chai says. Rav Ovadia Yosef, on top of the Ben Ish Chai, says I understand that the Ben Ish Chai doesn't like to say a sefeika against Maran, but there's many Acharonim that say sefeika against Maran. Now, if you read Rav Ovadia Yosef's work over here in Yabi Omer Chelek Tet, Yoredea Siman Vav, I suggest that you read it in Od Daled and Hey. You get confused because I don't understand. Rav Ovadia Yosef is always the one pushing very strongly that Kibalnu Horot Maran. And here, the Ben Ish Chai is doing exactly that and telling you we follow Maran, and if Maran decides something, even there's sefeikot against him, we don't follow that. So why in the world would we follow two sefeikot against Maran, where Maran himself said in both sefeikot, we don't do that. So Rabbi Shalom Misas steps in over here, and he says, I agree that usually we say sefeika against Maran, but over here you can't say that. In bishul akum, it's an exception, and he was vehemently opposed to saying sefeika in bishul akum. And his reasoning is that you can't say in the same seif, the Shulchan Aruch is telling you, in the same scenario, cooking in a house of shfachot, like a restaurant, if you want to say that that's shfachot. Cooking in a house of shfachot, where the person is subservient, Maran says asur. And right afterwards, he says, hadlakat ha'esh asur. That means in the same case where we said shfachot is asur, also, you should know hadlakat ha'esh doesn't help. So it's one after the other, says Rabbi Shalom Misas. You can't say that if you're going to combine both of them together, it's going to be allowed, because he's going in sequence. In the case of shfachot, it's still asur, and on that, he's building up that hadlakat ha'esh is also asur. So he said you can't say sefeika. So it's a pill. If you look at the Lashon of Rav Ovadia Yosef, he says, I don't understand what Rabbi Shalom is saying. Number one, he's saying you can't pile on the sefeikot. Why not? Maran speaking, mili ke amar. One nidon is this, and another nidon is this. Two separate nidonim, you could say sefeika. That's number one. Number two, he says, is it possible to say, this is Rav Ovadia Yosef talking, Atu gdole Ashkenaz shehitiru kelo hayu chas v'shalom? The Gedolei Ashkenaz that permitted hadlakat ha'esh, it's like they don't exist. It's like they don't exist. Ve'od, and on top of that, she'al kol panim kabbalat divrei Maran ena betorat vadai ena mitorat Safek. And here everything is written. Rav Ovadia Yosef says that the sefeika doesn't work because it works because we didn't accept Maran as a vadai, rather only as a Safek. Unbelievable. So this gives a glimpse on the shita of Rav Ovadia Yosef, and maybe even Rabbi Shalom Misas, besides bishul akum. What is Kabbalah Divrei Maran? It was often Safek. I think that from a lot of poskei Hakhamim-R we see not that way. First of all, Melech Shlomo Rabbi Shlomo ben Delan writes categorically, Maranu Malka, and if he said it's Asur, how can we say sefeika? Definitely he seems to imply that we held Maran be'ofen, that he was machriya, and that there's no two ways about it. Furthermore, Rav Ben Zion Bashaul in the New Or Letzion Chelek Hey Yoredea has a very, very important point. He says that you are telling me that you can't say that you want to say sefeika in bishul akum, but the truth is that you could only say that Maran was not machriya when he brings two opinions. But when he brings one opinion, hadlakat ha'esh doesn't help. He was machriya. That hadlakat ha'esh doesn't help. You could say sefeika against Maran, and this is what he said. He has a kabbalah from Rav Ezra Atiyah that way. So you could say sefeika against Maran when it's a safek, and Maran wasn't machriya, like yesh v'yesh, or even stam v'yesh maybe. But not when Maran brings one opinion categorically. So you have three opinions here. You have the opinion of Rav Ovadia Yosef is that Kabbalat Maran is often Safek. And you could say sefeika against Maran, no problem. Ben Ish Chai and Asher Li Shlomo didn't seem to understand that way. They understood that Kabbalat Piskei Maran is often Vadai. So what everybody thinks, it's exactly the opposite. They think that Rav Ovadia Yosef held Maran ad asof and Ben Ish Chai not. From here you see exactly the opposite. The Ben Ish Chai held Kabbalat Maran bevadai. And so did the Asher Li Shlomo. And I think that was the ruach of a lot of the Chachmei Sfarad. And then you have the Or Letzion who's in the middle. He says that sometimes Maran is a Safek and sometimes it's Machriya. And Rabbi Shalom Misas seems to say that Maran is b'torat Safek, unless you could deduce that he didn't mean that. So it comes out in bishul akum. It's actually a very, I would call it difficult heter to say, to rely on the sefeika, but it's not something that is totally out of the ballpark. There were poskim that say sefeika against Maran, and there were those who applied it. And because of that, there are some Sfardim who are lenient to go into restaurants and to buy stuff. And from here, I think it was such an important lesson, because we reveal and we get a glimpse at what the shorish of Kabbalat Piskim Maran is. Okay? Chazaku Baruch.